Hi all, this is a function notation video where the function is represented by a table. I have some other table examples, but in particular, this one has an application attached to it, so we'll have to make sure that we make sense of what everything means. All right, so my table represents the function I equals m of t, which outputs the number of Americans with internet access in millions and inputs the number of years after 1950. So always with tables, you want to just take a second to look really carefully and decide if information is organized in rows or columns and which row or column represents inputs and outputs. So here we definitely have information arranged in columns. The first column is my t values, so that's going to be inputs, years since 1950. And my second column are m of t values or I values, so these are going to be the number of Americans with internet access in millions. First thing we're supposed to do is find the value of m of 45 from the table and then explain what it means using everyday language. Okay, so when I see a statement like m of 45, the 45 is my input. So I want to go to my input column, the first one, and I want to find 45. And then to find the output, I'm just going to look at the corresponding number in the output column, which is 40. So m of 45 is equal to 40. And then I need to figure out what this means in the context of the problem. So 45, my input, was the number of years after 1950, which means I'm talking about 45 years after 1950 or 1995. 40 is my output, which is going to be number of Americans with internet access in millions. So 40 million people have internet access, 40 million Americans, in 1995. And your statement should be some version of that. So I'm going to say in 1995, 40 million Americans had internet access. And again, your wording doesn't have to be exactly like mine, but it should contain all of that basic information, and you should absolutely include all the numerical values when you're explaining the meaning of a statement. All right, the second part of this asked me to solve m of t equals 172. So now we've sort of flip-flopped. We're being given a value of m of t. We're being given an output. So we're going to go to our table and we're going to look for the output of 172. And the solve part means we should be solving for the appropriate input. So in this case, t equals 55 is our solution. And then we're supposed to explain the meaning of this information. It doesn't really matter which order you give the information. What I'm seeing there is 172 million Americans have internet access 55 years after 1950, so in 2005. I'm going to word this in sort of the opposite way from the last one just to show the way that the information came to us, but it's completely fine if you don't do that. I'm going to say 172 million Americans had internet access in 2005. Okay. I think it's completely acceptable here to say 172 million in words. If you rather tack on the extra 6 zeros, that's completely fine as well. Next part, we want to find the average yearly change in internet access between the years of 2000 and 2005. I think this 4 seems a little awkward. Okay, so this is asking us for an average rate of change, and we're given the year 2000, which in our table to find that we're going to have to figure out how long after 1950. It's 50 years after 1950, so here is our first piece of information, 113 million people. And then 2005 is 55 years after 1950, so 172 million people have internet access. The average rate of change part, we want the change in y, the change in our output variable. So 172 million minus 113 million. divided by the change in t, 55 minus 50. So basically 59 million additional people have internet access during the entire 5-year time period we're looking at, which will average out to 11.5 million Americans per year. Okay, so again, I don't expect this to be spot on, and there's nothing in the directions that say I have to explain using everyday language, but you should always include some sort of units that show me that you made sense of what this means. So basically, this is telling me that during the 5-year time period from 2000 to 2005, the number of Americans with internet access increased by 11.5 million per year on average. That would be my full interpretation, but just units are good enough based on the way this is worded. All right, the last part of this question asks us to use the information that we just found to estimate the number of Americans that will have internet access this year. Ooh, this is a dangerous one. I'm going to date myself possibly. I'm making this video in 2015, but I know no one's going to see it until 2016, so we'll go for 2016. Okay. So 2016, what do we know? We know how many Americans had internet access in various years. I would say if we're going to do our best to make a prediction about what should be going on this year, we should take the most recent piece of information. So we know that in 2005, 172 million Americans had internet access. We also know that for the most recent data we had, the number of Americans with internet access was increasing by 11.5 million per year. We're looking to go from 2005 to 2016. So during the 11 years, if it increased by 11.5 million per year, that's a grand total of 129.8 million. And if we add the 172 million onto this, we should get that in 2016, 301.8 million Americans have internet access. Okay, so again, this doesn't ask you to answer in a complete statement. So if you just said 301.8 million, I would be happy with that. You should definitely get at least the million in there. That's really important. It's not 301 people, it's 301 million people. All right, that's it for this one. Thanks for watching.